Welcome back to another episode of the Vendetta Sports Fantasy Show. We're here for episode 39. We're recording this on October 26th at night. We have myself, Scott Logush, and joining me are two new writers to the site, Ethan and Tyler. How are you two doing?
Doing pretty good.
Doing good. So, an exciting weekend and a better than expected Thursday night game. So let's get into some fantasy takeaways. First, from the Thursday night game, New York Giants at the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles won 22-21. Daniel Jones threw for 187 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Also had 4 carries for 92 yards and a hilarious stumble that certainly cost a lot of people at least 6 points in fantasy. And everyone else on Giants offense, Wayne Gallman, 35 yards, a touchdown. Sterling Shepard, 6 catches, 59 yards, and a touchdown. Is anyone on the Giants startable for fantasy, and what are your takeaways from this game? Because my first takeaway is that Daniel Jones, it's almost hilarious how oblivious he is in the pocket when it comes to pressure, because when Brandon Graham strip sacked him at the end of the game, it looks like he didn't even know what was going on around him. And there's something that can be said about being aggressive and taking shots down the field, but then there's also being careless in the pocket. And I think his carelessness in the pocket just makes him almost unstartable.
I'd agree with that. I'm looking at their next 3 games, going up against Tampa, Washington, and Philadelphia again. I don't think he can start any Giant besides maybe Graham Gano against Washington.
Tyler?
Yeah, I agree. I think the Giants are a mess, and you really can't start anybody from that team.
Yeah. Going on to the Eagles, Carson Wentz, 359 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, 14 yards on the ground, and a rushing touchdown. I was very happy with his 27.76 performance because I have him on my team for the site league. Eagles' leading receiver was Greg Ward, 5 catches, 42 yards, and a touchdown. Then Boston Scott, 46 rushing yards, 46 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. If you want to talk tight ends, Richard Rodgers, 85 yards. Carson Wentz has been able to perform well. He's starting to put it together in these last couple weeks against Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and now the Giants. He's been starting to put it together. Has Wentz fixed himself, and is that going to improve his fantasy value throughout the year?
I personally drafted Wentz in my main league, and my friend was yelling at me because I trash-talked Wentz all throughout the summer. I personally believe there is no way he goes up to what my expectations were for him. I think that this game, he had a good game against a terrible defense, and going into his next game, we will definitely see what happens with that.
Tyler?
Yeah, and everyone's starting to get healthy now, so you haven't seen everybody with the Eagles, right? Because Alshon Jeffrey's going to come back soon, so we'll see what the Eagles really are and what Carson Wentz can really do.
Speaking of injuries, Deshaun Jackson he injured his ankle on what you can argue about could have been a dirty hit. When we're going back to Wentz, ever since week 3 against Cincinnati, there's only been 1 week in which he didn't put up over 21 fantasy points, and that was against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Against the Bengals in week 3, he had 21.5. Against the 49ers in week 4, 21.42. 17.42 against the Steelers, 29.42 against the Baltimore Ravens, and now 27.76 against the Giants. I think Wentz is starting to turn the corner, and I think he's going to be great for the second half of the season.
I hope you're right, because I might go drop Teddy Bridgewater, or I might drop Stafford and pick him up in my main league, especially with him going up against Dallas next week.
Anyone who plays the Cowboys, they just seemingly have season highs and everything. Outside of Wentz, who else is a viable option on this Philadelphia offense?
I mean, everyone was saying Boston Scott, but personally, I bet the under 47.5 rushing yards. I was very happy with that. But in all honesty, I'm not liking anyone else as of right now. Fulgham looked nice for a couple weeks, but I don't see him keeping this up. I think that he was a couple-game wonder. I think that he's going to fall off once everyone gets healthy. Maybe Greg Ward, though.
Yeah, I think Boston can just be a spot start if you really need a running back on the bye weeks. But other than that, I don't know if you really want to just keep him in your lineup, depending on the
Carson
matchup.
Wentz. Sorry, you finished?
Yeah.
Phil Carson Wentz is the only consistent starter on the Eagles because he's the only one who's been healthy. Like Dallas Goedert banged up, and Zach Ertz banged up, and when he has been playing, he hasn't been playing well. Now what you'd expect from top-tier fantasy tight end. Moving on to the Sunday slate of games. Panthers at Saints. The Saints won 27-24. Teddy Bridgewater, 254 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 19.16 fantasy points. Mike Davis was a major disappointment this week. 12 rushing yards, 24 receiving yards. DJ Moore more than made up for it. 93 yards and 2 touchdowns. Should we be concerned going forward with Panthers running backs, or is this just a one-off game for Mike Davis?
And personally, I'm expecting Christian McCaffrey to come back, if not this week, then next week for sure, as long as nothing else happens in that injury. So I say that's probably going to be around 65 to 35% snap count for the first couple of weeks, and then eventually McCaffrey is going to earn it back to 70, 75%.
Tyler?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Christian McCaffrey is going to come back, and he's eventually going to take over that role. So, I mean, it is what it is. It's Christian McCaffrey. So,
Although you know who did get a nice rushing touchdown? Curtis Samuel. I'm very happy I started him in FanDuel leagues this year and this week.
Should be. Looking at the Saints side of things, Drew Brees, 287 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing yards, and a quarterback sneak for a rushing touchdown. Alvin Kamara, 83 rushing yards, 65 receiving yards, 14.8 points. And the leading receiver for the Saints was Marquez Callaway, 8 catches, 75 yards. Jared Cook had 32 receiving yards and a touchdown, and Deontay Harris had 46 yards and a receiving touchdown. What can we take away from the Saints' offensive performance this week?
Kamara's the start every week and has been the best running back in the NFL this year, besides maybe Derrick Henry. And the one game that Michael Thomas played, I think it was 4.7 points. So the Saints are relying on Thomas to get healthy, or even I've been hearing rumors of the trading, no matter what Sean Payton says.
What are your takeaways?
that I think Jared Cook it's getting more and more as a better tight end option than Higway and all the other and some more of the tight ends. So I think he should be ranked higher than what he is ranked currently. And he's available in a lot of leagues too. I don't know the percentage, but he's available in some leagues on ESPN.
You can say this right now. Alvin Kamara has not scored a touchdown in the Saints' past 4 games. He has not eclipsed or gone to 18 fantasy points in the Saints' last 4 games. And against the Lions, not a great defense. 17.9 points, no touchdowns. Against the Chargers, 11.9 points, no touchdowns. Week 6 was a bye. And against Carolina, 14.8 points, no touchdowns. That early season rise in production we saw from Kamara, it wasn't going to last, and now we're seeing it. Can Kamara turn around, or is this just going to be the new norm? He just gets a bunch of yards, no touchdowns, low amount of touchdowns, and he's really just mid to high teens in terms of fantasy points.
And looking at their next couple of games, you got the Bears, who this year have not been perfect in the rush defense, but he could probably have a good game against them. Then the Buccaneers, who actually have been very good against the run. I believe they held the entire Bears rushing offense to 35 yards that Thursday night game. The 49ers, who are slowly getting back everyone on defense. That won't be a good game. And then you got the Falcons and the Broncos, which are probably the 2 games that will be his best 2 of the year.
Talk about Kamara being a running back. He hasn't gone over 83 rushing yards. Most of his damage has been in the passing game. Because week 1 against the Buccaneers, 16 rushing yards, 51 receiving yards. Week 2 against the Raiders, 79 rushing yards, 95 receiving yards. Week 3 against the Packers, 58 rushing yards, but 139 receiving yards. Against the Lions, he had 83 rushing yards to 36 receiving yards. Then Chargers, 45 rushing yards, 74 receiving yards. And then last week against the Panthers, 83 rushing yards to 65 receiving yards. He's had more receiving yards than rushing yards in all but 2 of his games this year.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest with you, because they use Latavius Murray a lot in the shorter distance. But Kamara's been lining up in the slot a lot. In all honesty, I'm seeing Kamara as more of a better version of Tariq Cohen.
Tyler, what are your takeaways with that stat?
I think that's a good stat. I think that's just how the game is going for him. So I just think that's how they're going to utilize him because he's a quick running back and he could catch the ball. So he could catch passes like you said. So obviously that's how they're going to utilize him.
I just think if he's going to be a good fantasy running back going forward, he needs to get touchdowns.
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
With Latavius Murray taking over as the power back, he's missing out on a lot of 2, 3, 1-yard touchdown runs.
Yeah, for sure.
That's just not what you want. Moving on to the Bills and the New York Jets. The Bills won this one 18-10. Josh Allen, 307 passing yards, 61 rushing yards. That's it. No touchdowns from the Buffalo Bills. Zach Moss, 47 rushing yards, 25 receiving yards. Cole Beasley had a nice day, 112 receiving yards. The real star was Tyler Bass, making 6 field goals and getting 21 fantasy points. What are your takeaways from this game?
I kind of like to disagree with you on the Tyler Bass. He did miss I believe it was a 43-yarder, or was it a 45-yarder for the first kick or second kick of the game. I personally think that if you're able to make that 53-yarder, then you should be able to make the 45-yarder from his position. But
I never said he was perfect. I just said he was the only bright spot on the scoring for the Bills.
Then Cole Beasley. But other than that, I don't think there was really a bright spot, yeah.
Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, Beasley's got to be the bright spot too, right? Because he's got all those. How many yards did he have again?
112.
112 yards. Yeah, I mean, that's 2 bright spots, I guess, the field goal kicker and the wide receiver. Though you think Stephon Diggs would get something there too, but
he got 10.8 fantasy points this week.
I'm not playing PPR, so that's.
I play PPR.
Talking non-PPR, Diggs had good old 4.8 fantasy points.
Wow.
My major takeaway is that the Bills need to be able to finish drives and finish them with touchdowns. Because you can win, 18-10 against the Jets. You can win with just field goals against the Jets. But you're not going to be able to beat Seattle or Arizona, who they face later in the year. Not going to be able to beat the Niners or the Steelers by only scoring field goals. And this relates back to fantasy because touchdowns are the best way to get points in fantasy. You need Josh Allen to be able to run it into the end zone. You need him to find and utilize Stephon Diggs, who you traded a first-round pick for. You need him to be able to use Cole Beasley, who you paid a decent amount of money in free agency some odd years ago. You need to be able to finish drives in the end zone, whether it be with Josh Allen, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, whoever it may be. You got to be able to finish drives with touchdowns.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They also play the Dolphins, who are sneaky. Their defense.
Dolphins are sneaky good.
Yeah, they are. Their defense is getting better and better every week. So they got to finish them off. The Dolphins almost won that game last time they played. I forgot, a couple weeks ago or whenever. Dolphins almost beat them. But they got to finish.
Going back to that run game, though, Josh Allen was their leading rusher with 61 yards.
Yep.
I really want to see more from Devin Singletary because Zach Moss had 1 less carry than him and got 18 more yards. So Zach Moss might have his job by the end of the year if this keeps up.
To be honest, before this game, I thought Zach Moss was just wiped off the face of the earth because I had not heard a single thing from or about him before looking at this game and seeing that he somehow had 47 rushing yards. Bill's got to be able to finish in the end zone. It's going to benefit all of us in fantasy. Looking at the Jets side of things, Sam Darnold was hot to start the game, but he finished with 120 passing yards and 2 interceptions, giving him 0.8 fantasy points. The running back, La Michal Perne, I have no idea if I'm saying that right.
Oh, Michael.
39 rushing yards, 1 touchdown. Denzel Mims, 42 receiving yards. I think the takeaway from here is that the Jets' offense stinks, and if you have to start any of them in fantasy, you may as well just not start anyone.
Absolutely.
You could argue that Sergio Castillo was their best player for fantasy. I believe he had 4 points. Besides Mims, I think that's their leading guy besides Frank Gore.
I'm just going to go with the designation that I'm just not going to touch the Jets' offense for fantasy. I think that's the right decision there.
Yep.
Going ahead to the Browns at the Cincinnati Bengals. Browns won this game 37-34. Baker Mayfield, 297 yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and an interception. Kareem Hunt, 76 rushing yards, 26 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Rashard Higgins, 110 yards. Harrison Bryant, 56 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. Odell went down very early in the game when Baker Mayfield threw his one and only interception. After that, Baker Mayfield bounced back beautifully. I'm going to say this right now. It's hard to buy in to this consistent performance with Baker Mayfield because it was against the Bengals, and he has notoriously beaten the crap out of the Bengals and then fallen flat on his face against teams like the Steelers. Like, you saw this, I believe, last week. Baker Mayfield had the same rough start against both teams. It's just against the Steelers, it just kept coming and kept piling on. Against the Bengals, he managed to turn it around. And I'd attribute a lot of that to Cincinnati's crappy defense. Thing I will say, this offense is only going to go as far as Kevin Stefanski and the run game will take him. That being said, Kareem Hunt has been mainly the focal point of the offense when the Browns are able to control the game. Nick Chubb, if he comes back, he's going to return that role. It's going to be a good 2-headed attack. What do you two think?
I think that they got to get the passing game more consistent. The fact that Baker was 0 for 5 with the pick in the first quarter is terrible. And that he's lucky, like you said, that he was playing a terrible Bengals defense. But Kareem Hunt, very good game from him. And once Nick Chubb comes back, they're going to continue to ground and pound and attempt to get more wins. I personally had them finishing second in the division or third and making the playoffs in my preseason predictions. I'm not sure if that's able to happen now if they make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks that Odell Beckham is out for the rest of the season, right? But they have
ACL.
Yeah, they have Juice though. Is Juice still?
They have Jarvis Landry.
Yeah,
Baker Mayfield. Sorry, you finished now. I'll say one thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say Jarvis Landry is always an option too in their passing games. He has value as well.
I'm going to say there's a lot of factors to go into this, so we can't say it cut and dry. But it's going to be worth monitoring if Baker Mayfield plays better without Odell Beckham Jr. Because we saw his rookie year, he was able to light it up. Broke the rookie passing touchdown record. And then when Odell Beckham came the following year, something happened, and it turned into 23 or 22 touchdowns to 22 or 21 interceptions. And so a lot of things, there are a lot of other variables. You have the fact that it's going from a different coach, going into a new year, teams changing, offensive line got worse. So you can't say it's cut and dry. Odell is the reason Baker Mayfield regressed. But we're going to be able to find that out now. And I feel that if Baker Mayfield performs well, gets the Browns to the playoffs later in the season, and produces well in terms of fantasy, the Browns may have to move Odell Beckham Jr. And if moving Odell Beckham Jr. is what causes Baker Mayfield to play well and play like he did as a rookie, that's the move they have to make. And then if they do move on from Odell, and in this time without Odell, you can look at Rashard Higgins. He produced very well in Odell's absence, and I feel he can keep it up for the rest of the year.
I think he can too. I also like the fact that Donovan Peoples-Jones came in clutch, and the fact that his role is definitely going to increase.
Yeah, I agree.
Going to the Bengals side of things, Joe Burrow, 406 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, an interception, 34 rushing yards, and 1 rushing touchdown to give him 33.64 fantasy points. Tyler Boyd was the leading receiver, 101 yards and a touchdown. T. Higgins, 71 yards and touchdown. A.J. Green, 82 yards. My takeaway from this is that A.J. Green is still not even the best wide receiver on his team. His time has come. He's not going to be able to produce for you in fantasy.
Yeah, A.J. Green's gone with is like T.Y. Hilton, where you could make him just basically you could drop him at this point. I mean, I dropped T.Y. Hilton. He's not producing like he normally does, so I don't know what's going on with him.
Ethan?
AJ Green used to be my favorite receiver in the league when he had the prime Andy Dalton, but his time's come. He needs to move on, not retire, but like the Bengals, if they can get a fourth or a fifth out of him, they should trade him.
Any other takeaways from that game?
Nope.
No.
Well, we're going to move on to the Dallas Cowboys against the Washington football team. Andy Dalton, 75 passing yards, 16 rushing yards, and an interception before he got knocked out by John Bostic. And then Ben DiNucci had 39 passing yards. Neither quarterback hit 3 fantasy points. Amari Cooper was the only thing that remotely produced on the Dallas offense with 80 receiving yards. The Dallas offense looks lost. Like, without Dak Prescott, nothing can be done. Zeke was atrocious, 45 rushing yards, 6 receiving yards. Got absolutely bowled over in pass coverage. You all saw that video. And it also doesn't look like the players on the Dallas offense want to be there. Because one thing that was pretty concerning, when you saw Andy Dalton get knocked out, I'm not condoning violence or anything, but no one on the Dallas offense got in John Bostic's face after that hit. No one. They didn't do anything. When Mason Rudolph got hit over the head by Myles Garrett, you saw Marquise Pouncey and other players get in Myles Garrett's face after that.
Yeah, it almost turned into Miami versus FIU from like 97.
Yeah. Like, and that shows that the players' hearts, it's not in it. They're not invested in the game. And it's probably because they're getting blown out. But that's as much coaching as it is the players executing and doing their job on the field. So I don't think anyone from the Dallas offense is playable because their quarterback stinks.
Yeah, I mean, they got a 7th round rookie going at quarterback, so you're really not going to start him. And then they got Ezekiel Elliott, who I don't know what's wrong with him, but he's just not
fumbling
the same.
issues. The team gets down by so much they can't run the ball anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a nightmare fantasy-wise for everyone on that offense.
At this point, why don't they just trade Elliott?
Can't. Contract's too big.
Yeah,
Don't pay running backs.
Running back might be the least important position in football.
It's the most replaceable position.
I'd rather have the best player in the league than the best running back in the league at this point.
Moving on to the Washington football team, Kyle Allen had a phenomenal day. Big surprise. Quarterback's having a great day against Dallas. 194 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 11 rushing yards. Antonio Gibson, 128 rushing yards and a touchdown. Terry McLaurin, 90 yards and a touchdown. Logan Thomas, former quarterback, 60 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. I think this just goes to show that anyone who plays Dallas is going to have a season high in pretty much everything on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I would just play that matchup. Just whoever is playing the Dallas defense, just play all those receivers and quarterback and running back, because they'll have a huge day, like you said.
Yep, Gibson especially, 128 yards on the ground and a touchdown, and then through the air, nothing. But still, 18.8 points isn't that bad for a running back, especially one that no one knew what his position on the depth chart was going to be coming into the year.
Moving on to what many people consider the game of the week, even though it's slotted in at 1 o'clock. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Tennessee Titans. Pittsburgh Steelers won 27-24 off a Gostkowski missed field goal. Ben Roethlisberger, 268 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions. James Conner, 82 rushing yards, 29 receiving yards. Juju Smith-Schuster, 85 receiving yards. And Deontay Johnson, who for some reason hates Trey Daubert's guts because he stinks when Trey starts him, dominates when Trey benches him, 80 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. What I'm saying is this is a typical Big Ben game. We all knew what's happening. This seemingly always happens when he starts for the full season. Always has one game where he just inexplicably throws more picks and touchdowns. Did this against Jacksonville a couple years ago. Not surprised that it happened against the Tennessee Titans, who are a good team. All knew it was coming. But his willingness to take chances is what makes him a good fantasy quarterback. It's similar to Jameis Winston last year. His ability and willingness to take risks is what led to a big payoff in terms of fantasy. Obviously, that didn't work out too well this week with 12.62 fantasy points. But still has a phenomenal touchdown-interception ratio, 12-3, I believe. And he's still playing very well coming off elbow surgery.
Yeah, and Big Ben has Schuster and Chase Claypool, which is it's amazing what he has done. He's like 14, he averages 14.9 points a game fantasy wise. And, he had a bad game yesterday, but you're going to have that with a rookie wide receiver. And at Notre Dame, he lit it up too. So, it's just, he's a talented receiver. So yeah, Big Ben has a bunch of weapons.
Yeah, definitely. The Pittsburgh Steelers have done a phenomenal job drafting wide receivers outside of the first round. Like they drafted Antonio Brown outside of the first round, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool. I don't know what it is there, but they just find a way to just draft great receivers. Looking at the Tennessee Titans, Ryan Tannehill, 220 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 5 rushing yards. Derrick Henry was held in check for 72 total yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown, 153 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown.
I had that on my team.
Takeaway is that the Steelers did a great job containing Henry. And, this was the Derrick Henry that came off 38.4 performance against the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
So Henry was coming in hot, and the Steelers managed to slow him down a bit. Ryan Tannehill also performed well with 17.3 fantasy points. A.J. Brown, 21.3 in non-PPR leagues. Is Ryan Tannehill legit for fantasy quarterback? Because I think he is. He managed to do this well against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And he didn't start out well in the first half at all.
At this point, he's doing phenomenal, especially for someone I considered one of the most overpaid and overrated quarterbacks coming into the season. He's proven me wrong. Good for the Titans. They're the second or third best team in the AFC right now. Tannehill, Henry, and A.J. Brown are putting the offense on their back.
Yeah, well, he got all that Ryan Tannehill got all that Adam Gase off of him. All that bad juju from Adam Gase, and now look at him. He's really a reliable fantasy quarterback.
Is there any concern for Derrick Henry going forward? Because this was his third lowest amount of fantasy points he had in the year. Second lowest was against the Broncos, 13.1, and then the Jaguars at 8.4. I don't think there's much reason to have any concern with Derrick Henry going forward, mainly because the Pittsburgh Steelers have a legit defense and a legit run defense. I mean, Robert Spillane stood Henry up at the goal line in the game. I feel this is just good running back meets a great run defense. He's going to be better next week.
Yeah, and in the beginning of the game, the Tennessee Titans offensive line was dominated by the Pittsburgh defensive line, and that hasn't happened. You said that happened like 2 other times because of the 8 points and the 13 points in the other 2 games. So I'm not really worried about it. Yeah. So I'm not really worried about it. I mean, if you have Derrick Henry, you're starting him, no question.
Especially next week against the Bengals, and then the week after that against Chicago.
Yeah. absolutely.
Green Bay Packers at Houston Texans. Aaron Rodgers with the bounce back game, 283 passing yards. Devontae Adams, Jesus Christ, he had 31.6 fantasy points. He tore up the Texans. Deshaun Watson wasn't too bad either. 309 passing yards, 38 rushing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. David Johnson, 42 rushing, 42 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Randall Cobb, 95 receiving yards. What did we learn from this game?
Need to play defense in the second half.
Pardon?
The Packers need to learn how to play defense in the second half. They were up, I think it was 21 or 28-7 at one point. Yeah, they were up 28-7, and they let the Titans score 13 fourth quarter points. Yes, they were up a lot, but they can't do that against great offenses because they're going to end up flopping like the Falcons have done the past 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think the fantasy takeaway is that that game against the Buccaneers was just an outlier game for Aaron Rodgers. Like we saw with Ben Roethlisberger, it's just one of those games where stuff just doesn't go right.
Yeah.
And then for the Texans, David Johnson is only serviceable because they're trying really hard to justify that trade. That's about it.
Who would you say are the 3 most startable players on the Packers that are not named Aaron? Who's the most startable player on the Packers that's not named Aaron or Devontae?
All right, so yeah, let's just take away the 2 best players, and who can you start? That's the question you just asked me.
Yeah, pretty much. What do you say,
Really
Tanya?
no one.
A good start?
I wouldn't say it's a good start.
I'm trying to think of the running back. When you take the
Aaron Jones, yes, I'd take the running back.
Yeah.
But with the way Aaron Rodgers has been playing, I'm not sure if there's much left for the running backs. So obviously some left. Jamal Williams had 17.4 points, but I'll be taking Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams regardless. If I had to choose a running back, if I had to choose someone other than those 2, it would have to be a running back just by virtue of they're going to get more touches.
Yeah.
Moving on to the Detroit Lions at the Atlanta Falcons. Lions won 23-22. Matthew Stafford with 18.4 points, 340 yards, and a touchdown. DeAndre Swift, 27 rushing yards, 21 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Kenny Golladay, 114 receiving yards. Matt Ryan, 338 yards, touchdown. Todd Gurley, 63 rushing yards, 19 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. Julio Jones, 97 receiving yards, and Calvin Ridley, 69 receiving yards, and a touchdown. This is one of those games where Matthew Stafford, he was playing well, but he's not getting the touchdowns. That 1 touchdown came late in the game winner. And that was only because Todd Gurley fell into the end zone by mistake. If Todd Gurley makes the right play there, Matthew Stafford doesn't have a good game. I thought Matthew Stafford was going to be great going into the year. This was his 5th game under 19 fantasy points this year. I'm willing to take the L and that Matthew Stafford is not going to be a good fantasy quarterback for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, he had a great matchup. I read the stat that Atlanta gives up the most fantasy points, 29 points in receiving, and he only got 23. So it was, I expected more out of Matt Stafford, especially against the Falcons.
Ethan?
I mean, I started Stafford this week thinking that he was going to go off against a horrendous Falcons defense. And if it wasn't for those last 2 plays, the one to Golladay and then the one to, I believe it was Hawkinson for the touchdown, Stafford didn't do much. I'm thinking, do I drop him for Carson Wentz, which I originally dropped Wentz for him? Or would I drop Bridgewater instead?
Carson Wentz has been, like we said earlier, Carson Wentz is starting to turn around. As we're talking about the Falcons, Matt Ryan, 4th game held under 18 fantasy points. Earlier before the season, we talked about Matt Ryan doing well simply because the Falcons suck. And that's still the case, but he's just not producing as well as he normally does. Moving on to the Buccaneers at the Las Vegas Raiders. Brady with 369 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown for 36.8 points. Ronald Jones, 36 total yards and a touchdown. Scotty Miller, 109 receiving yards and a touchdown. Gronk with 62 yards and a touchdown. I'm just going to have some fun with this. I said Scotty Miller was going to be a solid wide receiver 2 or 3 option. And some weeks he has. You got to be able to just live with the days he'll get you like 0 to 3 points. For days like today, will it get you over 16 points? As for this, I don't think this level of offense is sustainable for Brady because the Raiders' defense has been and is the problem of that team. It's simply a quarterback taking advantage of a good matchup.
What do you think about?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
What do you think about Gronk this year? I mean, it looks like these past 2 games he's come back. Maybe not to prime Gronk, but definitely good enough. Would you say that he is startable?
I'd say it's by virtue of the fact that O.J. Howard is injured. And it's that more than anything.
Oh, and Mike Evans is, I mean, I know you can't drop him, but he's like outside the top 30.
I said before the year, I did not like Mike Evans at all just because of his volatility.
Yeah. I wish I could drop him, but I can't in one of my leagues.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Okay, going to be looking at it for the Raiders. Derek Carr, 284 passing yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception, 19 rushing yards for 19.26 points. Jalen Richard, solid 24 rushing yards. Nelson Aguilar, 107 receiving yards and a touchdown. The Raiders can't run the ball without Josh Jacobs, and who knew that Nelson Aguilar would be a viable fantasy option this year? Those are my 2 takeaways.
I honestly agree with that one. I really have no idea. Nelson Aguilar came out of nowhere this year. Congratulations to him. He's definitely proving himself that he can actually catch.
Yeah.
Impressive when you get a wide receiver who can catch. Chiefs at Broncos. Patrick Mahomes, 200 yards and 1 passing touchdown. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 46 rushing yards, 17 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Le'Veon Bell, for what it's worth, 39 rushing yards. Tyreek Hill, 55 receiving yards, and a touchdown. The Chiefs' offense wasn't lights out this game against the Denver Broncos.
Did they need to be? They had 2 defensive/special teams touchdowns scored.
Fantasy-wise, he wanted to be lights out. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still chasing that Week 1 performance. He killed the Houston Texans in Week 1 and then hasn't been close since. And so, anyone else have other takeaways for the Chiefs there?
They need to be versing an average team to be doing good on offense. If they're versing like the Jets next week, I'm truly not sure what the Chiefs are going to do on offense next Sunday. Because why would they run or risk throwing to one of their better options that could get hurt against the Jets when they can just – in all honesty, they could probably pull the starters out at halftime if this was high school, but they're not. Mahomes is going to run it in there, hand it off. I expect Le'Veon Bell actually to have a better game this Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Jets, so I don't know. Their offense is probably going to be the same as it was this time, but as against the Broncos, so we'll see what happens.
All right, looking at it for the Broncos on the offense side, Drew Lock, 254 passing yards, 2 interceptions, 8 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown for 12.96 points. Melvin Gordon had 80 total yards and a touchdown. Albert O, I'm not going to try to say his last name because I know I'm going to screw it up, 60 receiving yards. That Denver offense is still looking for some form of spark. It's been fairly lackluster for the majority of the year, and they're still looking for that spark. So until then, I don't like starting anyone on the offense.
I agree with you on that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're probably going to struggle on offense. I don't know the remaining games, but it's probably going to not be a good offensive performance from them.
Going to the Jacksonville Jaguars against the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers won 39-29. Gardner Minshew, 173 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 21 rushing yards. James Robinson, 19 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown with 18 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. Chris Conley, 29 receiving yards and a touchdown. The Chargers defense is an overall solid defense, and Minshew played well. There have been rumors about him potentially getting benched. And if he does get benched, which still remains to be seen, he's a viable fantasy quarterback by virtue of the fact that he's a starting quarterback on a crappy team that's going to be trailing. He's a good fantasy quarterback for this year going forward. If he does get benched, third stringer Jake Luton, someone Trey said earlier before the season, look out, wrote a post on him. He could, if Minshew gets benched and they put Luton in, Luton could be a solid quarterback. The only issue is for the Jags, I don't know if anything else about this game is consistent. I don't know if it's sustainable. I don't know if James Robinson getting 2 touchdowns and over 120 total yards is sustainable. Chris Conley didn't do well in the receiving department. Yeah, he got a touchdown, but only 28 yards. I don't like anyone on the Jags outside the quarterback for fantasy.
Yeah, they're too up and down. Everyone else is too up and down. So I would only start the quarterback.
And everything I've been seeing has been James Robinson's looked good, but not this past game, but like 2 games ago, he only got, I think it was like 8.9 points just because of the touchdown. Actually, my bad. Correct me, I'm wrong. He had, I think it was 12.9, but still. He's somewhat consistent, but he relies on the touchdown too much. He doesn't get as many yards every game.
Touchdowns are key in fantasy. Looking at the Chargers, Justin Herbert had a phenomenal game as well. He passed for 347 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, led the team in rushing with 66 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Herbert has been playing amazingly. Is this sustainable at all?
Yeah, I mean, he's been not. It was 38 points fantasy-wise. He's been trending upwards for 3 or 4 weeks now. So I think he could maybe be a 20-plus fantasy go-getter the rest of the season. I mean, he's got the next two matchups are very favorable for him. And then he has the Dolphins, and then, he's just a viable starter for fantasy.
Keenan Allen had 125 receiving yards, and Jalen Guyton had 84 receiving yards and a touchdown. I feel as long as Justin Herbert's playing well, these receivers are going to continue to play well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jackson got you 10 points. The running back, Jackson, got you 10 points. So on a day that the Indianapolis Colts running back, Jonathan, was out, and Myles Gaskin, that's a good option.
Myles Gaskin, Dolphins running back, has been doing well for me. Almost done. We got 2 games left. 49ers at Patriots. Jimmy Garoppolo's big return to New England resulted in 77 passing yards and 2 interceptions for 7.48 fantasy points. Jeff Wilson Jr., another guy that me and Alex both said when he gets a start, he's going to be great. 120 total yards and 3 touchdowns this week. Brandon Ayuk, 115 yards, and George Kittle, 55 yards. The offense was able to succeed despite Garoppolo's struggle. This just proves my point of I don't care who you give Kyle Shanahan at running back, he's going to make him a star.
Yeah.
So does Wilson continue this?
Well, he got injured on his 3rd touchdown run. So it remains to be seen if he will be starting next week. But I don't care who you give Kyle Shanahan. Whatever running back gets to start and whoever he wants to feed, they're going to go off. Looking at it for the Patriots, Cam Newton, 98 passing yards, 3 interceptions, 19 rushing yards for negative 0.18 fantasy points. You got to see some Jared Stidham, 64 passing yards and an interception for 0.86 fantasy points. Damian Harris, 58 rushing yards, 12 receiving yards for 7 points. Jacoby Myers, 62 total yards, 6.2 points. Patriots offense is just hot garbage.
Yeah.
The same weapons that were there last year, arguably much worse. And, like, whatever luster that Cam Newton had after that Seattle game's gone. And he didn't even play that phenomenally that week. Cam Newton he's been hurt. He's not the most accurate quarterback. And unless he's going to be running over people for touchdowns, he's not going to be the best fantasy quarterback.
I think that there's no one on the Patriots I'd start. Or at least not on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to sit down and think, do I want to start Julian Edelman, who had 1 catch for 13 yards?
I'm thinking I don't want to touch anyone on the Patriots offense.
Yeah. But the defense got you 5 points, so at least they did for me in the NFL fantasy leagues.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to what was a beautiful Sunday night game that went into Monday morning in the Eastern time zone. Seattle Seahawks at the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals won this one 37-34 in a shootout between two dual-threat quarterbacks who both played baseball. Russell Wilson, 388 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, which is kind of worrisome. 84 rushing yards. I believe he led the team, giving him 29.92 fantasy points. Carlos Hyde, 76 total yards and a touchdown. Tyler Lockett, the story of the night. 200 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns, 38 points. Thank God I didn't have to play him this week. What I'm going to say is this. Russell Wilson, despite the 3 interceptions, almost gave you 30 points. All the attention going to DK Metcalf is leaving Tyler Lockett open. Don't forget about him. And even though they're letting Russ cook, running backs are still going to get their fair share. Chris Carson went down early in the game with an injury, so Carlos Hyde picked up where he left off. I'm loving Seattle, especially their offense in terms of fantasy. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Russell Wilson, they're amazing. DK Metcalf had the play of the night, which had no bearing on fantasy, but it was amazing. Actually, it does have some bearing on fantasy. It robbed the Arizona Cardinals of a pick 6. And DK Metcalf chased down Budda Baker. I believe he hit over 22 miles an hour at one point, averaged somewhere in like 21.6 miles an hour on that rundown. Someone of his size, that is absolutely insane. So what do we have about Seattle fantasy-wise?
Start Wilson. Start Chris Carson when he's healthy. You start Lockett. You start Disley if you have another option. You start Metcalf. So you're starting 2 receivers, a running back, and a quarterback from them, and maybe a tight end. Their entire offense is phenomenal.
Could you win a fantasy league if you just have the Seattle offense starting for you?
Yeah, probably.
Not if they play as well as this week, every week.
Like if they keep this pace up and the pace that DK Metcalf had throughout the season, could this be like a Pittsburgh Steelers from like 2015 to 2017 where you just have their quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and Ben Brown and Antonio and Le'Veon Bell, and then you'll just find a way to win? Because it's looking like that. Russell Wilson has been balling out. I believe he's the front runner in the MVP conversation because this was his bad game. This was his slip-up game. This was his, this is kind of shaky. And he still had 3 touchdowns.
Yeah. I think they said on the broadcast that he was on pace for 60 touchdowns to break Peyton Manning's 55 touchdowns.
He breaks that record. A, you're set if he's on your fantasy team, and B, he's undoubtedly the MVP.
Yeah, for sure.
Ethan?
He's my MVP pick this year. I think that he'd have to choke away the second half of the season to not be named MVP.
Anything fantasy-wise?
Don't
for the Seahawks.
start. Oh, sorry.
For
Yeah,
the
for
Seahawks, you start everyone that you can that is above number 2 on the depth chart.
All right. Going to the Arizona Cardinals, the victors in this game. Kyler Murray, 360 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 67 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown to give you 37 fantasy points. Chase Edmonds, 145 yards. DeAndre Hopkins, 103 yards, and a receiving touchdown. What can we take away from this?
Well, first off, Kenyon Drake will be out a few weeks with a slight tear of a ligament in his ankle. That was reported about 45 minutes ago.
Wow,
And
there you go.
Kyler Murray is probably the play of the week for quarterbacks besides Russell Wilson at this point. Kyler's been the best fantasy quarterback this year, I believe.
I believe Trey wrote an article earlier today that Kyler Murray is the best fantasy quarterback in the NFL for the 2020 season. One thing I'm going to say, Zane Gonzalez, 15 fantasy points. I needed to pick up a waiver wire kicker. I picked up Zane Gonzalez because I figured it was going to be a high-scoring game. It was. Thank you, Zane Gonzalez. I have basically won my week because of you.
I picked up Badgley, so that was kind of annoying.
Tyler, what are your takeaways from this game?
Mine is sorry, Kendrick Drake. I have to drop you now because Edmonds is better. That's all.
And healthy. All right. That's going to do it for the Thursday night and weekend slate of games. We're recording this before Monday Night Football. Anyone have any closing thoughts?
Not much. Just a great week for football, and let's hope next week's an even better one.
Amen to that.
I need Allen Robinson to go off tonight. So I need to win my league.
I need Jimmy Graham to not bullshit his way to 18 points. I need Jimmy Graham to not bullshit his way to 18 points, and I'll be fine.
I need David Montgomery to not get me any more or any less than negative 10.3.
All right, so that's going to do it for the show. Check out the website, vendettasportsmedia.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for more. Check out the other series we have going. We got Jackson's Vendetta University Dynasty, Maximum Football 2020. Got my Toronto Junior Argonauts Dynasty, Maximum Football 2020 again. Got the Tandemonium Sports Show. Buy a shirt from the store. Buy some merchandise from our shop. And until next time, thank you all for watching.